Sarah Mitchell stared up at the towering glass mansion, her worn messenger bag clutched tightly against her side. The morning sun reflected off the windows, nearly blinding her as she gathered the courage to press the intercom button. At 24, she had worked plenty of jobs to put herself through college, but nothing quite like this. The position of nanny to tech mogul James Carson's children promised to pay more than all her previous jobs combined. The wrought iron gates swung open with a soft whir, and Sarah walked up the curved driveway, her sensible shoes crunching on the pristine gravel. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she approached the massive front door, remembering the extensive background checks and multiple interviews she'd already been through. The Carson children, Emma, age 12, and Lucas, age 10, had barely spoken during their brief meeting, watching her with careful, intelligent eyes that seemed to hold secrets. The door opened before she could knock, revealing Mrs. Rodriguez, the house manager, whose stern expression had become familiar during the interview process. "You're 3 minutes early, Miss Mitchell. Mr. Carson appreciates punctuality, but he doesn't like having his schedule disrupted." She ushered Sarah inside, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "The children are in their study room. They've already had breakfast." Sarah followed Mrs. Rodriguez through the mansion's pristine corridors, trying not to gawk at the modern art pieces that probably cost more than her entire college education. The house felt more like a museum than a home, everything perfectly placed, untouched, cold. The study room door was slightly ajar, and Sarah could hear whispered voices and the rustle of paper. Mrs. Rodriguez cleared her throat, and the sounds immediately ceased. When they entered, Emma and Lucas sat at their respective desks, textbooks open, the picture of perfect students. "Children, Miss Mitchell is here to begin her duties," Mrs. Rodriguez announced. "I trust you'll show her the same respect you've shown your previous nannies." The slight emphasis on previous made Sarah's stomach twist. She had heard rumors about the Carson children going through 6 nannies in the past year, though no one seemed to know exactly why they had left. Emma looked up, her dark eyes studying Sarah with an intensity that seemed beyond her years. "Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. We'll be fine now." The dismissal in her voice was so polite yet so firm that the house manager merely nodded and left, closing the door behind her. For a moment, silence filled the room. Sarah stood there, feeling like she was being evaluated by a corporate board rather than 2 children. Finally, Lucas spoke, his voice quiet but clear. "Do you believe in keeping secrets, Miss Mitchell?" The question caught her off guard. "That depends on the secret," she answered carefully. "Some secrets protect people, while others can cause harm." Emma's posture shifted slightly, interest flickering across her face. "And what about secrets that do both?" Before Sarah could respond, a notification chimed on her phone. The schedule Mrs. Rodriguez had sent her. "Time for your mathematics lesson," she said, reaching for the appropriate textbook. But as she moved toward Emma's desk, she noticed the girl quickly sliding something beneath her current workbook. Just for a second, Sarah glimpsed what looked like architectural drawings and a list of numbers. The morning passed in a structured routine of lessons and scheduled activities, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening beneath the surface. The children were unfailingly polite, completing their work with minimal prompting, yet they seemed to communicate with each other through glances and subtle gestures. During their afternoon break, Sarah excused herself to use the bathroom. On her way back, she heard Lucas's voice drifting from the study room. "We need to move faster. Dad's planning to start construction in 3 months." "I know," Emma responded, her voice tense, "but we have to be careful. If anyone finds out..." The conversation cut off abruptly as Sarah's footsteps approached. When she entered the room, both children were exactly where she'd left them, absorbed in their reading. But Lucas's tablet was tilted at an odd angle, and Sarah caught a glimpse of what looked like property development plans before he switched the screen off. That evening, after the children had gone to bed, Sarah sat in her small but elegant room in the staff wing, unable to sleep. The Carson children were hiding something big enough to make 6 nannies leave in a year. Part of her wondered if she should just walk away now before she got too involved. The salary was incredible, but was it worth the risk? Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. "Hey sis, Mum's medical bills came in. It's worse than we thought. Insurance won't cover the experimental treatment." Sarah closed her eyes, remembering her mother's brave smile as she fought against the aggressive cancer, refusing to give up hope. This job wasn't just about her anymore. Her family needed this. Opening her laptop, she began to research James Carson's tech company, focusing on their current projects. If the children were worried about construction starting in 3 months, maybe understanding their father's business would help her unravel the mystery. Several hours later, her eyes widened as she found it. Carson Technologies had recently acquired a large plot of land in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. The press release promised a state-of-the-art research facility that would revolutionize the area, but the comments section was filled with local residents worried about being pushed out of their homes. Sarah sat back, her mind racing. The architectural drawings she'd glimpsed on Emma's desk, the property development plans on Lucas's tablet. Were the children somehow involved in their father's business dealings? But why all the secrecy? As she finally lay down to sleep, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was standing on the edge of something much bigger than herself. Tomorrow, she decided, she would start paying closer attention to every detail, every whispered conversation, every hidden document. She had to know what these children were planning and why they were so desperate to keep it hidden from their father. What she didn't realize was that her discovery would not only change her life, but would also challenge everything she thought she knew about wealth, power, and the true meaning of making a difference in the world. If you think this nanny's discovery was shocking, wait until you see what these children are really planning. Keep watching until the end. This story will touch your heart in ways you never expected. The next few weeks passed in a blur of routine and carefully guarded secrets. Sarah watched as Emma and Lucas maintained their perfect student facade while working on something that seemed to consume every moment of their free time. She noticed the pattern. Whenever she left the room, whispered conversations would begin, only to cease the moment she returned. Their tablets and notebooks disappeared with practiced efficiency, leaving no trace of whatever project consumed them. One rainy afternoon, everything changed. Sarah was helping Lucas with his history assignment when Emma burst into the study room, her usual composure shattered. "They're starting early," she gasped, her face pale. "Dad's meeting with the contractors today. They're moving the timeline up." Lucas's pencil snapped in his grip. "How long do we have?" 6 weeks, maybe less." Emma's voice trembled. "Everything we've worked for." Sarah cleared her throat gently, reminding them of her presence. The siblings exchanged a long look before Emma squared her shoulders, a decision visibly forming in her eyes. "Miss Mitchell," she said formally, "how much do you know about the Milton Heights neighborhood?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. Milton Heights, the area where Carson Technologies was planning their new facility. "I know it's one of the oldest communities in the city," she answered carefully. "Mostly working-class families who've lived there for generations. And do you know what's going to happen to those families when my father's company builds their new research center?" The pieces started falling into place. "They'll be displaced," Sarah said softly. "Property values will skyrocket, taxes will increase, and most of the current residents won't be able to afford to stay." Lucas stood up, his young face set with determination. "Show her, Emma. We need help, and we're running out of time." Emma hesitated for a moment before crossing to a seemingly solid wall panel. She pressed her hand against it in a specific pattern, and a hidden compartment slid open. Sarah gasped as she saw what was inside: detailed architectural plans, financial projections, and dozens of handwritten letters from Milton Heights residents. "We've been working on an alternative proposal," Emma explained, spreading the documents across the table. "One that would allow Carson Technologies to build their facility while preserving the existing community." Sarah leaned in, amazed by the sophistication of the plans. The children had designed a mixed-use development that would integrate the research facility with affordable housing, community spaces, and small business incubators. It was brilliant and completely different from the current corporate plans. But how did you... Sarah trailed off, staring at the professional quality drawings. Emma's been taking advanced architecture courses online for 2 years, Lucas explained proudly. And I've been studying urban development and social impact assessment. We used Dad's own business metrics to prove our plan could be just as profitable while helping people instead of hurting them. The previous nannies, Sarah realized. They found out? Emma's expression darkened. They thought they could use our project to blackmail Dad or sell the story to the media. We couldn't trust them. Why are you trusting me? Sarah asked. Because we've been watching you, Lucas said simply. You spend your lunch breaks researching affordable healthcare options. You send most of your salary to your family. You care about people more than money. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, touched by their observation and trust, but a terrible realization hit her. Your father, he has no idea about any of this. Dad's not a bad person, Emma insisted, though her voice wavered. He doesn't see the human cost of his decisions anymore. Success has put him in a bubble, and no one dares to challenge him. We thought we had more time, Lucas added. Time to perfect the proposal, to make it so comprehensive and convincing that he'd have to listen. But now, a sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Mrs. Rodriguez's voice carried through. Miss Mitchell, Mr. Carson would like to see you in his office immediately. Sarah's blood ran cold. Had they been discovered? The children stared at her with panic in their eyes as they rushed to hide the evidence of their work. Don't worry, she whispered, squeezing their hands. Whatever happens, I'm on your side. The walk to James Carson's office felt like marching to her own execution. Sarah's mind raced, trying to figure out what she would say if he questioned her. She couldn't betray the children's trust, not when they were fighting for something so important. The office door opened to reveal a vast space dominated by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. James Carson sat behind a massive desk, his attention focused on multiple screens, displaying what looked like construction plans. He was younger than she expected, maybe early 40s, with the same dark eyes as his children. Miss Mitchell, he said without looking up, I understand you've been with us for nearly a month now. That's longer than any of our previous nannies managed to last. Sarah's heart pounded. The children are a joy to work with, sir. Now he did look at her, his gaze sharp and assessing. Are they? Most people find them challenging, too mature for their age, too interested in things that shouldn't concern them. I find their intelligence and curiosity admirable, Sarah replied carefully. Carson leaned back in his chair, studying her. My children are very good at keeping secrets, Miss Mitchell. It's a quality I generally admire. But lately I've noticed something different about them. They're distracted, anxious, and I need to know why. Sarah felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. In one direction lay security, her job, her mother's medical bills, her future. In the other lay the trust of 2 remarkable children trying to make the world a better place. Before she could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. The office door burst open and Emma and Lucas rushed in, clutching their precious documents. Dad, Emma announced, her voice shaking but determined. There's something we need to show you. The next few minutes would either destroy everything the children had worked for or change the course of countless lives. As Sarah watched the scene unfold, she realized that sometimes the biggest acts of courage come from the smallest hearts. Hit subscribe now to join our community of storytellers. This family's journey is about to take an unexpected turn that will leave you speechless. James Carson's office fell into a heavy silence as Emma and Lucas spread their documents across his pristine desk, their hands trembling but determined. Sarah stood near the door, her heart racing as she watched the children present months of secret work to their father. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the windows, highlighting the tension on every face. What is this? Carson asked, his voice unnaturally quiet as he picked up one of the architectural drawings. His eyes narrowed as he recognized the location, Milton Heights. It's an alternative proposal for the research facility, Emma explained, her voice steadying as she moved into presentation mode. One that doesn't require displacing the current residents. Lucas stepped forward, pulling up financial projections on his tablet. We've run the numbers, Dad. Using your own profit metrics and cost analysis models, our design would actually increase long-term revenue by creating a sustainable community hub around the facility. Carson's expression darkened as he flipped through the papers. How long have you been working on this? 8 months, Emma admitted. Ever since we overheard you discussing the project with the board? 8 months. Carson's voice was dangerously soft. 8 months of going behind my back, accessing confidential company information, interfering with business decisions you couldn't possibly understand. But we do understand, Lucas protested. We've studied everything: urban development, community impact, sustainable architecture. Emma's designs have been reviewed by... Reviewed? Carson stood abruptly, his chair rolling back. Who else knows about this? Emma lifted her chin. We found mentors online. They didn't know who we were. We used anonymous accounts. But they confirmed our work is solid. Dad, please just look at... Enough. Carson's fist came down on the desk, making them all jump. Do you have any idea what you've done? The risks you've taken, the contracts that are already signed. The contracts can be amended, Emma insisted, pulling out another document. You consulted with strangers about confidential corporate matters. Carson's voice rose. Do you realize you could have exposed the company to industrial espionage, leaked sensitive information to competitors? We were careful, Lucas said, his voice small but stubborn. We only shared the architectural concepts, never any company details. Dad, if you'd just listen, I've heard enough. Carson pressed a button on his desk. Mrs. Rodriguez, please escort my children to their rooms. They are not to access any electronic devices until further notice. The house manager appeared almost instantly, her face grave as she gestured for Emma and Lucas to follow her. But the children stood their ground. Dad, please, Emma's voice cracked. Just look at these letters. Real people will lose their homes, their community, everything they've worked for, everything they... Now! Carson's shout echoed off the office walls. As Mrs. Rodriguez led the children away, Sarah caught Emma's desperate glance. There were tears in the girl's eyes, but also a fierce determination that said this wasn't over. Once the door closed, Carson turned his attention to Sarah, his expression thunderous. You knew about this. It wasn't a question, but Sarah answered anyway. I only found out today. Sir, your children, they're extraordinary. They saw a problem, and instead of ignoring it, they worked to find a solution that could help everyone. They're children playing with things they don't understand. Carson snapped. And you were hired to supervise them, not encourage corporate espionage. With all due respect, sir, Sarah felt her own anger rising. They understand more than you think. They understand that success doesn't have to come at the cost of other people's lives. They understand that profit and compassion aren't mutually exclusive. Carson stared at her for a long moment. You're fired, Miss Mitchell. Pack your things and be out of this house within the hour. Sarah's heart sank, thinking of her mother's medical bills, but she stood her ground. Before I go, I have something to say. Those children love you. They believe in you. They spent 8 months working on this project, not to defy you, but because they believe you're capable of being both successful and good. They see the man you could be, the man you probably were before success made you forget what it's like to struggle. She took a deep breath, knowing she had nothing left to lose. The question isn't whether they understand business, Mr. Carson. It's whether you understand what really matters. Leaving the office, Sarah headed to her room with tears burning in her eyes. As she packed her meager belongings, she heard muffled crying from Emma's room next door. Her heart ached to comfort them, but she knew any attempt to say goodbye would only make things worse. As she waited for her rideshare at the front gate, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of a filing cabinet drawer, slightly ajar, with a familiar-looking set of documents inside. Another text followed. Dad's office. He didn't throw them away. Sarah smiled through her tears. Maybe all wasn't lost after all. But before she could respond, another message came through. This one from her sister. Mom's in the hospital. The cancer's spreading faster than they thought. We need you home now. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. She had failed to keep the job that could have paid for her mother's treatment. She had failed to protect the children and their precious project. Everything was falling apart. As her ride pulled up to the gate, she took one last look at the Carson mansion. Somewhere in there, two remarkable children were probably already planning their next move. And somewhere in their father's office, a set of documents waited like seeds of change, ready to take root if only given the chance. What Sarah didn't know was that events were already in motion that would bring her back to this house, and that the real fight for Milton Heights was only just beginning. Don't miss a single moment of this emotional story. Subscribe and hit that notification bell. What happens next will move you to tears. 2 weeks after leaving the Carson mansion, Sarah sat in a hard plastic chair beside her mother's hospital bed, trying to focus on her laptop screen through exhausted eyes. The steady beep of medical monitors had become the soundtrack to her days, punctuated by the quiet conversations of doctors and nurses in the hallway. You should go home and rest, her mother said softly, reaching out to touch Sarah's hand. Despite the toll of aggressive cancer treatments, Margaret Mitchell's eyes remained bright and observant. You've barely slept since you got here. I'm fine, Mom. Sarah managed a smile, though her heart ached at how frail her mother's hand felt in hers. Besides, I'm working on something important. She wasn't lying. Between hospital visits and helping her sister manage their mother's care, Sarah had been reviewing the photos Emma had secretly sent her of their proposal. The children's work was even more impressive than she'd initially realized. They hadn't just designed an alternative development. They'd created a comprehensive community preservation plan that could serve as a model for ethical urban development. Her phone buzzed with another message from Emma, sent through the secure messaging app they'd been using to communicate. Dad's been locked in his office for days, reviewing everything. Lucas heard him on the phone with the contractors yesterday, asking about construction delays. Sarah's heart leaped. Was it possible that James Carson was actually considering his children's proposal? Before she could respond, another message came through, but something's wrong. Dad's rival company, Nextech, somehow found out about the alternative plans. Their CEO is spreading rumors that Carson Technologies is going soft and letting children run the company. The board is pressuring Dad to move forward with the original development immediately. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. Have you told your father about the mentors who reviewed your work? Their credentials could add legitimacy to the proposal. We can't, Emma replied. Dad's forbidden us from accessing any devices. We're using Lucas's old phone that he hid in the air vent, but we can't get to any of our research or contacts. A nurse entered to check Margaret's vitals, and Sarah quickly locked her phone. As she watched the nurse work, an idea began to form. The hospital where her mother was being treated was one of the oldest in the city, with a reputation for combining cutting-edge medicine with compassionate care. More importantly, it was known for its community health initiatives in underserved neighborhoods, including Milton Heights. Mom, Sarah said slowly, how well do you know Dr. Richardson? Margaret smiled. Amanda, she's been my doctor for 20 years. Why? Would she be willing to talk to me about the hospital's community programs, particularly in Milton Heights? Her mother's eyes sharpened with interest. This has something to do with those children you were caring for, doesn't it? The ones working on the secret project. Sarah hesitated, then told her mother everything. Margaret listened intently, her expression growing more animated than it had been in weeks. Amanda would definitely want to hear about this, Margaret said when Sarah finished. The hospital's been worried about losing their Milton Heights clinic if the neighborhood changes too drastically. They've been looking for ways to preserve their presence there. Within an hour, Dr. Richardson was in Margaret's room, reviewing Emma and Lucas's proposal on Sarah's laptop. The doctor's excitement grew with each page. "This is remarkable," she said, pausing on the section about integrated community health services. The children actually allocated space for an expanded medical facility with preventive care programs and job training for local residents interested in healthcare careers. "Do you know what this could mean for our outreach programs?" Sarah leaned forward. "Would you be willing to write a letter supporting their proposal, specifically addressing the health and economic benefits to the community?" Dr. Richardson was already pulling out her phone. "I'll do better than that. I'm on the hospital's board of directors, and we've been looking for ways to partner with tech companies on community health initiatives. This could be exactly what we need." Over the next few days, while Margaret rested between treatments, Sarah worked with Dr. Richardson to develop a formal partnership proposal between the hospital and Carson Technologies. The doctor reached out to her contacts in community health organizations, gathering data on the positive economic impact of preserved neighborhoods with integrated healthcare services. But just as hope was building, Sarah received an urgent message from Lucas. "Dad's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. They're voting on whether to proceed with the original development plan immediately." Emma's crying, "We've failed." Sarah's hands shook as she typed, "You haven't failed. Trust me, but I need you to do something brave." She quickly outlined her plan. It was risky. If it backfired, James Carson might never forgive his children. But if it worked... "Okay," Emma replied after a long pause. "We'll do it. But how will you get into the building? Security knows you've been fired." Sarah looked at her mother, who was watching her with a knowing smile. "I'll find a way," she wrote back. "Just be ready." Margaret reached for her daughter's hand. "Go," she said softly. "Go help those children save their community. I'll be fine for a few hours." Sarah bent to kiss her mother's forehead, blinking back tears. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart. Now go show them what our family is made of." As Sarah gathered her materials and prepared to leave, her phone buzzed one final time. It was a message from Mrs. Rodriguez, the last person she expected to hear from. "Service entrance, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late, those children need you." Sarah squared her shoulders, determination filling her chest. Tomorrow morning, everything would change, for the Carson family, for Milton Heights, and for her. She just hoped she was ready for what was coming. What she didn't know was that James Carson was about to face a choice that would force him to confront not just his business decisions, but the very foundations of his relationship with his children. And the outcome would depend on whether a fired nanny, 2 determined children, and an unlikely alliance of community leaders could make him remember who he used to be, before success had built walls around his heart. We're almost at the most touching part of this story. Subscribe now and join thousands of others who've already fallen in love with these incredible children. At precisely 8 a.m., Sarah slipped through the Carson Technologies service entrance, her heart pounding against her ribs. Mrs. Rodriguez was waiting, her usual stern expression softened by something that looked almost like pride. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes, the house manager whispered, leading Sarah through back corridors. "Mr. Carson has no idea the children are planning to attend. Security will try to stop them, but I've made sure their access cards still work." Sarah clutched her folder of documents, which included Dr. Richardson's partnership proposal and letters of support from various community organizations. "Thank you for helping us." Mrs. Rodriguez paused, her eyes distant. "I grew up in Milton Heights. My mother still lives there, in the house where I was born. When I heard what those children were trying to do..." She straightened her shoulders. "They remind me of their mother. She never walked past suffering without trying to help." Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed. Emma's message was brief. "We're in position. Dad just arrived at the boardroom." The executive floor of Carson Technologies was all glass and chrome, with sweeping views of the city below. Sarah could see Milton Heights from here, not the statistical abstraction in corporate reports, but a living community of homes and dreams. She took her position in a small conference room adjacent to the boardroom, separated by a glass wall currently frosted for privacy. Right on schedule, she heard the board meeting begin, James Carson's voice carrying through the walls as he presented the original development plans. Sarah's hands grew sweaty as she waited for the signal. It came halfway through Carson's presentation, the boardroom door flying open as Emma and Lucas burst in, followed by Dr. Richardson and 3 other community leaders they had contacted. Sarah watched through the now transparent glass as chaos erupted. "Dad, please." Emma's voice was clear and strong. "Before you vote, you need to hear the whole story. This is unacceptable," Carson started, but Lucas cut him off. "No, Dad. What's unacceptable is destroying people's lives when there's a better way, and we can prove it." Dr. Richardson stepped forward, introducing herself and the others, the director of a local business association, the head of a community education program, and a respected urban development researcher. They had all reviewed Emma and Lucas's proposal, and they had come prepared with data, projections, and partnership offers. "Your children's design isn't just ethically sound," Dr. Richardson explained, displaying their proposal on the boardroom screen. "It's a revolutionary model for sustainable urban development. The hospital is prepared to commit significant resources to the integrated healthcare facility. Local businesses are ready to invest in the retail spaces. You have an opportunity to transform not just Milton Heights, but the future of corporate community development." Carson stood frozen, staring at his children. "You did all this? Found all these partners?" Emma's voice shook slightly. "We had help. Someone who taught us that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing." That was Sarah's cue. She entered the boardroom, meeting Carson's shocked gaze steadily. "Your children never stopped believing in you, Mr. Carson. They knew the man who taught them to care about others was still there. Underneath all the success, the board has concerns about costs," one of the directors interrupted. "Nextech is already moving to take advantage of any delay." "Actually," the urban development researcher stepped forward, "we've analyzed the long-term projections. The sustainable development model, combined with the proposed partnerships, would generate 23% more revenue over 10 years than the original plan. Not to mention the PR benefits of being an industry leader in ethical urban development." Carson sank into his chair, his eyes moving from the presentation to his children's faces. "You really did think of everything, didn't you?" "We had to," Lucas said quietly. "Mom always said that caring about people was what made you special. That's why she fell in love with you. We couldn't let you forget that." The mention of his late wife seemed to hit Carson like a physical blow. Sarah saw something crack in his carefully maintained facade, a glimpse of the man he used to be, the one who had taught his children to care so deeply about others. "The board needs to discuss this privately," Carson said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "Everyone except the directors, please step out." The next hour was the longest of Sarah's life. She sat with Emma and Lucas in the waiting area, holding their hands as they waited for their father's decision. Dr. Richardson and the other community leaders made quiet phone calls, ready to mobilize support either way. When the boardroom door finally opened, Carson's face was unreadable. He walked directly to his children who stood to face him. "The board has voted," he said formally, then his voice softened. "Your proposal has been approved." Emma and Lucas collapsed into their father's arms, years of tension dissolving in tears and laughter. Carson held them tight, his own eyes wet. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "Your mother would be too. You helped me remember who I am." Over the children's heads, Carson's eyes met Sarah's. "Miss Mitchell, I believe I owe you an apology and a job offer, if you're willing to come back." Sarah's heart leaped, but she thought of her mother in the hospital. "I can't leave my mom right now. She needs me." "I know," Carson nodded. "Dr. Richardson told me about her condition. That's why the job offer includes family medical coverage, retroactive to your first day with us. The experimental treatment your mother needs? It's covered." Sarah's vision blurred with tears as Emma and Lucas rushed to hug her. She had helped save their project, and now they had helped save her mother. 6 months later, Sarah stood with the Carson family at the groundbreaking ceremony for the new Milton Heights development. The community had come out in force to celebrate, including Mrs. Rodriguez's mother, who had just been appointed to the Resident Advisory Board. Emma and Lucas, still flushed with success, were already talking about their next project, a scholarship program for local students interested in architecture and urban planning. Their father listened with pride, his arm around Lucas's shoulders, looking more relaxed and happy than Sarah had ever seen him. As she watched construction begin on the development that would preserve instead of destroy, Sarah thought about the power of childhood dreams and second chances. The Carson children had refused to accept that success had to come at the cost of compassion. Their determination had not only transformed their father and saved a community, it had reminded everyone involved that the greatest legacy we can leave is the positive change we create in others' lives. The next day, Sarah sat with her mother in the hospital's garden, sharing the latest news about the project. Margaret, responding well to her new treatment, smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. "You know what I love most about this story?" her mother said softly. "It proves that sometimes the smallest hands can build the biggest bridges, between rich and poor, between profit and compassion, between who we are and who we want to be." Sarah squeezed her mother's hand, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of hope. In the distance, she could see the Milton Heights neighborhood, where an unlikely partnership between two determined children and a caring nanny had proven that the greatest achievements come not from building walls, but from opening hearts. What would you do if you were in Sarah's position? Would you risk everything to help these children save their community? If this story touched your heart, make sure to hit like and subscribe. Our channel thrives because of amazing viewers like you who believe in the power of heartwarming stories. See that video on your left? Trust me, you won't want to miss it. It'll give you those same feelings of hope and inspiration you're experiencing right now. By subscribing, you're helping us continue bringing touching stories like this one to your screen every single day. Join our family of storytellers and never miss another emotional journey.